if you don't know how to explain these kinds of transactions to folks or the needs, you can end up in a really, really bad situation with a title company that's going to tell you they can do it. And ultimately, they blow it up because they really don't understand what we're doing. And it's not that it's rocket science. It's just that it's different.
Welcome to the Top Tier Podcast, where we take you to new heights in the world of real estate, capital raising, and business entrepreneurship. Meet your hosts, Daniela and Landon, industry experts passionate about success. Join them on the Top Tier Podcast as they share real-world experiences, practical solutions, and strategies to overcome business and real estate challenges. From expert interviews to actionable advice, they aim to inspire and empower you. Subscribe now to never miss an episode.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining Top Tier with Landon and Daniela. Today, we're going to take you through one of our rockiest, most creative transactions, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're all, I think, just by us circling back, Landon and I are going to relive some things and might even learn a thing or two from each other. So,
totally.
Landon.
This was a fun one. And I'm so grateful to have gone through this deal, this transaction with you at the helm, because I don't know if we would have completed it without you. So it's really cool that we get this opportunity to talk about this transaction and dive deeper for other people to learn more things about it as it relates to the mechanics of it, where we started to where we finished and everything in between, because so much changed from where it began to where we ended up at the end of the day. But so
I think that's a part of these transactions, though, that it's funny because I forget that the majority of people that see the stuff we talk about are not doing the amount of transactions we're doing on a monthly basis.
Right.
And I forget that this sort of meandering path isn't familiar to a lot of folks. So because I kind of come in when the purchase contract is signed. So I was hoping that maybe you could start and tell us about what the negotiation first took, look like with the seller, with the agent, and how did the contract how did it even get to me?
Yep, totally. Yeah. And so a little background on this, guys. Again, my name is Landon Moore. Thank you for joining us, Daniela and I, on this. And we're talking about one of our deals, and this deal is a subject to transaction. We found this property, my team and I found this property on market. So it was listed on Zillow. The address is 1020 South 23rd Street, Tacoma, Washington, 98405. And I'll pull it up on the screen here in a little bit if we want to, but this property was listed on market for, I think it was 45 days, 50 days. And my team, a gentleman on my team named Jesus Dacuma, funny enough, he actually lives in Tacoma up in Seattle area. And so it was perfect for him to call his backyard. But he cold called this agent. He just reached out to the agent. That was a lead that we pulled based on a filter criteria. I actually just got done yesterday with the owner of PropStream. PropStream is a software that our team uses exclusively to pull our data for all of the leads and all the transactions that you and I work off of. Is we're pulling it from PropStream, whether it's on market, off market, cash, creative, whatever it may be. From a real estate transaction standpoint, that's where we're getting our stuff. And I just did a whole video on that whole thing, so you guys can check that out. But we pulled this lead, and Jesus called this agent and had a conversation and just went through and had a discovery call as it relates to really the four pillars that our team emphasizes. And through rapport building and everything, the four pillars are condition, timeline, motivation, and price. And of those four things, he's just trying to discover if we're a good fit to purchase this property and kind of figure out what the situation was with the seller. So in a magnifying glass, the seller had moved across the country to Georgia with her significant other, husband, or whomever it was. I think it was husband. And he was the agent was having a hard time selling the property because they just purchased it. What was it? A year and a half or 2 years ago, I think it was, Daniela.
Right.
And
so it was like a pandemic purchase.
So what was that? Top of the market.
Yep.
Right. Gangster interest rates. So she ended up having, I think it was a 3% interest rate. Is that right? And so highly attractive, but she purchased it with a VA loan. And if you know anything about those, typically when you're purchasing a home with a VA loan using your entitlements, you're getting 100% financing. In addition to that, you can usually have your closing costs covered. So she got into this deal for $0. So the whole thing is financed. Well, since then until now, the market actually took a little bit of a dip. And so this agent's having a tough time selling the home only because he can't drop the price any lower. The market,
she has no equity.
She has zero equity in her property. So any more dollars she drops, the seller has to come out of pocket to pay to close this deal.
Right.
And Jesus even learned on that discovery call, this agent who's an amazing agent, he actually did work on the property, like drywall repair, painting, and some other handyman things to the property to get it list ready. Like he even shampooed the carpets. He was telling me some other light bulb stuff. He replaced a bunch of electrical, like just super helpful to help this poor seller out. The seller you'll learn about later was going through a hard time and had a lot more stuff behind the scenes that you uncover as you continue to talk and have conversations in her life. That it was, I'm grateful that we got to come in and be the resource for her to remove that burden from her life that she has going on, of the many that she currently has. So,
right. And the commitment that the agent had to getting this done, she's not there. He's in her house. He's trying to get everything together. Yeah. And I think that when Jesus made that cold call, it's for creative transactions. Would you say, what is the number of calls that it takes to actually capture a client? And do you think that it's, in my mind, it has to be part timing. It has to be like the right person, the right situation. But what do you think it was for this? How many calls did it take before the seller was on board with this sort of a transaction?
Yeah. So, in our KPIs internally for us, in terms of cold calls to these agents or sellers to contract on our team, is typically 100 to 1. So every 100 calls that our team makes, we typically get one purchase contract under contract, a signed contract for you to help us facilitate with. And on this transaction, Jesus had a conversation with this seller, one conversation, and what his whole goal at the end of it, his deliverable, was to set up what we call the closing call. That closing call is for me and the seller to hop on a phone call and really iron out the finer details, more of the higher level, like what's it going to take to get to the next step? Do I need to draft up a purchase contract, or is there a higher level, what's the word I'm thinking of? Objection that I have to overcome or provide value for this seller. Maybe there's a bunny, if you will, out there that we need to provide a resource for the seller to get this contract signed to move this forward. And
what's a bunny? Real quick, Landon, what's a bunny?
Oh my gosh. So in every one of these transactions, when you're speaking with a seller purchasing a piece of property, not necessarily for your home or a retail purchase, all those little things, as an investor, whether you're purchasing cash, whether you're purchasing creative, there's always some nuance to the deal, to the property, to the seller, to the situation that stands out in the transaction, that there's a level of pain or motivation that's sitting there that the seller needs relieved, whatever that may be. And so when I say bunny, I'm relating it back to a story that a mutual friend of ours, Payson Morby, talks about ad nauseum in multiple videos you guys can go check out, that discusses, he had a seller one time that he purchased a property for, his very first wholesale deal he ever did, where the seller had 12 bunnies. And her only holdback to accepting an offer is she needed someone to take those bunnies. And so
I remember this story.
So he talks about that and talks about how he was able to find the person to take those bunnies, such that she was accepting his contract. So in every one of these transactions, there's a bunny. There's something hanging out there that's going to get them to either accept your offer, believe in you, find you credible, whatever it may be. Right. And so in this particular transaction, it was really expedience. It was time. Because what we uncovered in that closing call that I had with this agent was that the seller was 3 months behind on her payments. She was gone, right? And so when you get 3 months behind on your payments, you're entering into a phase of an NOD, a notice of default, and you're heading towards foreclosure, right? And for a veteran, that is a nightmare situation, because not only are you getting foreclosed on, which wrecks your credit for 10 years, so no other homes, your personal credit, no cars, it's so devastating. And then also, but as a veteran, your entitlements are gone. You can no longer use your entitlements. So it's so handcuffed in the foreclosure status when you're a veteran that you can no longer use those entitlements in the future. So that was the bunny that we
Those were
had.
the bunnies.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was what we really, I identified in that phone call that I got to highlight more and more about and figure out a solution, whether we are the best fit or not. Because there are times where we're not the best fit for
Correct.
the seller situation, right? And
Absolutely.
I operate, our team does, and I know you do too, in complete transparency. If we're a square peg for a round hole, our team will be the first one to say, hey, I don't think we're the best fit for you, but here's some resources, or here's someone that can be and provide you, I think, the solution that may fit a little bit better for you. And it goes a
Right.
long way to building relationships with agents and sellers. And then also too, you feel good when you're at the end of it. You're not trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these creative transactions, they're so particular, and
Yeah.
it's really timing and situation and all these things where you're in a serious bind
Yeah.
and you really just need immediate relief. And I
Right.
think that that's a question I interface all the time. Why would somebody ever sell their house like this? And every file we have is another story. And a file is what a transaction or a sale turns into after we get a purchase contract. It turns into like a file that goes through title and escrow. And every time we get a file, it's another reinforcement of this strategy really does work for a group of people, and
Yep.
it really provides the right solution for them at the right time. But is it clear? Is it a clear glass of water always? No. But typically people in those situations, their life is anything but clear.
Spot on.
So,
Spot on, Daniela. And what's beautiful about that is you and I get the opportunity to help serve our local communities and where we're purchasing homes, and help relieve these sellers of these problems and these burdens and these issues that they're currently facing in their world as it relates to their properties. And more, it seems like more and more, once we do get under contract and open up escrow, that's when we start dating and start figuring out more and more of the situation. Like, I know, for us at that point, once I got done talking with that agent, one of the big things in their holdback, and I think it was more so on the agent's gatekeeping side of things than the actual sellers, because the seller had so much going on. I think the agent was trying to do his best fiduciary responsibility and due diligence to protect his seller. And so he actually required us to have our contract reviewed by a third-party outside attorney to approve it before we go under contract. I don't even know if you knew that.
how often do you think that happens? I think it's a handful of times that people actually do that level of due diligence, but when they do, you feel even more secure moving forward, because it's like, okay, you've engaged with legal counsel, you completely understand what's happening, and now it's time to boogie. Now we open escrow and see what we can do with this.
Exactly. It gave the green light. For me, it solidified the terms that we're offering. They're accepting. They just want to get the okay from someone else, because this is just like many people operate. It's something new. It seems a little bit on edge of something we've never done before. So they operate in a fear-based mindset. And so immediately it's no. But once they get that attorney's thumbs up that they hired outside of I could of course provide an attorney, but that attorney's just going to say what I need him to say, So no, they approved it, and then we opened up, or we went under contract. And I want to illuminate here real quick. The original terms when we went under contract were, we were going to give the seller on this property $12,000 cash in pocket. So at close of escrow, she was going to receive $12,000 net in her pocket to go on and do whatever. The agent was set to receive $10,000 cash for his commission as a part of that transaction. And then me and my team, we were wholesaling this deal to an end buyer. Right. And so that end buyer was going to pay us kind of a finder's fee, if you will, a wholesaling fee. We call an assignment of $11,000. And then additionally, we are going to pay the additional closing costs, excise tax in the state of Washington, as well.
It's expensive.
Oh my gosh, those are deals. And those are moments of contention with some sellers and agents, because it's like, who's going to pay the excise tax? Because I remember a property that I own that ended up being $12,000 as a part of our closing cost package. That was double our cash to seller and agent commissions on our last deal. It's like, Anyway, and so, original terms were all of those things. Plus we were covering all excise tax, closing costs, and then a transaction coordination fee. And so all of that's bundled up when we went under contract and opened up escrow. Do you recall the date we went under contract and opened up escrow?
I don't recall the exact date, but I'm pretty sure did we start in December?
I think it did, because our close of escrow date originally was January 3rd, 2024.
Yes. Okay. So we definitely started in December.
Yep. Yeah.
And your team is always really great. I think that there's a lot of expectation when you're doing something different like this, a different kind of transaction and purchase. I think a lot of investors are used to doing all cash, and they can get those transactions done very, very quickly in some instances. And creative transactions, they really take almost the full 30 days. You really have to go through that level of scrutiny and due diligence and reviewing all these tiny things that in a cash transaction, you really are just taking the property for exactly what it is. And in creative transaction, you're not. There are multiple points in escrow where renegotiation can be opened up. But I think one thing to highlight with this transaction specifically was that it was a VA and it was in Washington. So, again, Landon and I have a little bit more experience with this because we're constantly doing deals in different states. So we get to see what the flavor is in that state. And what I mean by that is, how can you legally purchase and transact in that state? And when you have government-backed loans like FHAs and VAs, that changes dramatically what is possible and what isn't. And sometimes it's simply the preference of the title or escrow company. When you're doing creative transactions, your pool of people that you can transact with minimizes, because you want to work with the folks that actually understand what this transaction means, how this works, the expectations throughout escrow, how to close this thing, how to deal with issues that come up on this thing. And then you take that small pool and you bring in a VA or an FHA, and the pool shrinks even more. So in states like Washington, they're very, very challenging to process subject to transactions. VAs and FHAs are almost nearly out. And so when we found a title and escrow company that said, yeah, we can do this, no problem. And somebody that we both knew, I think we both knew.
Yeah, we've done deals with that title company multiple times before. Right.
Yeah. And, I think that when you get that green light on a challenging transaction, you kind of go, okay, let's go. Right. Let's open up. And now is the next chapter for everybody involved.
And totally too, to that point, we went under contract. The next step is obviously working with you and your operation. And I think you highlighted a really good point that I wanted to bring back up, is that, in a cash transaction, we can typically close these things as quickly as a week, because it is just clean as is, boom, boom, boom. But the creative transactions are a little bit more nuanced, and to the benefit of not only us, but also the seller too, to ensure that the protections are in place, the proper security instruments are in place to protect the seller in the case of many of the risks involved in these types of transactions. And you guys and your team with Daniela, Rinda, and your team at the Collective TC, you guys do such an amazing job in ensuring that the protections are in place and they're done the right way and everything. Typically in a creative transaction, there are no appraisals because there's no banks involved. There rarely is any financial contingencies because there's no bank involved. And so there's less hurdles to overcome in these transactions, which would make you think, okay, cool, we can close sooner. And in some cases we can. I've done a few that we've done in 2 weeks because it was so turn and burn. But the majority of the time, and what we'll find out in this transaction, is that it can take 30 to 60 days sometimes, depending on the situation and what's going on, if there's arrears or mispayments and liens and certain things that pop up that you're not aware of at the forefront, And so, but I think a big thing that you need to give yourself a pat on the back for is that time allows you to do what you do best, which is setting everyone up for success. And you guys do that on the seller side, and the seller doesn't, I don't think, much know that, is that you are working on their behalf in a certain way to ensure that these instruments are in place, because they don't know. And so we're educating them along the way. We're sharing the documents with them. Obviously, they're signing a ton of different things, including a limited power of attorney and other things along the way. And so I know you're working hard to educate them. You're the main point of contact when it comes to a lot of things once escrow's open. So for me, to your point, what you said is once we find a team that we get the green light that they'll handle that transaction, in full transparency with my team and the way we're structured, I go, okay, cool. My job on this file, on this transaction is typically done at that point, and my partner, Chris, will handle it from there. And now my job is to go out and find more opportunities and do more higher money making activities. And so when that opened escrow, I was like, okay, cool. That one's moved on. Done. I'm not involved in that one much anymore.
Yeah. And that is super, super common with a lot of the teams that I work with. And I think that is the goal of, you want to call them transaction coordinators, transaction managers, transaction consultants, whatever you want to call this role, which really is, it's so different than in a typical brokerage and traditional real estate. You really do act more of a consultant, and, you know, you walk a fine line because you're not licensed. So your job is to educate openly, to act as the main point of contact, and to really steer the ship. And what I like to say, and, you know, I'll jump from the ship metaphor to the Jeep. I kind of explain this to people. When you give me your signed purchase agreement, I'm getting in the Jeep in Africa and I'm going through a safari. And the Jeep the entire time is hitting, like, you don't even know the boulders, the dips, this lion came out of it. It's my job, though, to get us to the oasis. It's my job. And I'm only going to bother you when things come up that need to be addressed. And I think that can be a really hard thing for investor teams to let go of, is letting go of that trust where, you know, I'm constantly telling people, fall back. You'll be surprised. I'll be right there. I'll be right there. But you got to let go. You got to let me do this, because if you're not letting me do my job, you really can't go back out and do your job. Right. So I'm grateful that, you know, I have a couple clients where we've developed this culture where it really is pass Daniela the ball, and she'll let us know when she needs us.
What you do and what you provide beyond just simply the, I guess what you would call it, like the resume of what your scope of work or expectations are, like how much you care, your intentionalities with each file. You care for them as if they're your own and you're purchasing the homes. And I think that goes a long way as to why I love working with you and your team and the culture you create, because I have a very similar culture with my team and we collaborate in that way. So much so that I love that our teams can work together because our cultures are very similar, that I couldn't see our team doing a single file without you and your team as a part of it. We wouldn't even know where to go or what to do because of how much above and beyond you guys go with everything, to not only just ensure, because we love to operate again in transparency and integrity. And so making sure the sellers are protected, we're not hiding anything. We're ensuring that they understand that we are taking over the payments of their current mortgage. The debt is staying in place in this transaction, so on and so forth. And they're fully aware. And I know you're operating the same. It's a streamlined communication stream, I guess is what I'm saying. And so that's what's beautiful about our cohesiveness of working together that way. And it makes it fun. And one thing I wanted to touch on about your Jeep Safari metaphor, so great. It's so freaking true. It reminded me back to a previous deal that we had in Washington. I don't know if you probably remember this, up in Silver Lake, where we were on day 29 of 30 of escrow. And the real estate agent sabotaged the deal entirely, got the seller to lie to us on her behalf.
Oh my God, that was another crazy. Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness. The agent even called the lender on their next purchase to say what we're doing is illegal, like a full deal. So that Safari is so true. The lion hopped out at that moment right there for us on that one. But there's so many things that happen in these journeys of the transaction. But I'll tell you, like, from my perspective, having now done multiple of these, the journey is the reward. The journey is the experience you get to have that is so fun. Of course, purchasing a property is great. Of course, real estate is awesome. Of course, cash flow is great. But that journey and the stories we get to share and do and tell, and the sellers we get to help, like, that's what it's all about. That's the golden goose versus the end result, you know?
It also helps you so much in business in general. If everything just went smooth all the time, you would be crippled when things went wrong. And I feel like on every single one of these files, something really batty happens. Really out of left field. I mean, there's a few where they go smoothly, but the majority of them, you're sitting there going, I learned something new about human nature. I learned something new that's a possibility. And now I feel like when I engage just in general as an entrepreneur, I feel so much stronger. I feel so much more capable of just dealing with how challenging this choice is. It's a challenging choice. And now I kind of look at real estate as this thing where, hey, it's supposed to go wrong. And when it goes right, what a gift.
Totally true. Totally true.
Yep. It's supposed to be crazy because we're dealing with so many people's livelihoods here, and the seller on this particular deal is a really, really good example of how tough this was for the position that she was already in.
Yep. Yeah, totally. And so now, as we move forward, right? So we opened up escrow in this with the title company, and the whole plan was to exit. So at close of escrow, we were purchasing this property subject to the existing mortgage. So the deed was going to transfer into our in buyers that we're assigning it to's entity, their LLC. The debt is just going to stay in place. But on the tax assessor's page, it's going to show whatever our in buyer's entity was. I don't even remember what it was. Doesn't matter. But and so we're proceeding forward, right? So now we're in our due diligence period. We're in our inspection period, just like a typical transaction, right? And I forget how long into the inspection period, but there wasn't really much, right? We got past due diligence. We were good to go. It was going to be, I think, $1,000 of some rehab stuff. They weren't even going to go back to the seller, nothing, because it's pretty much an as-is transaction. So we were pretty much coast to clear all the way through the month of December, through Christmas, through the new year. And now we're past the new year. We're excited that next week we have a close of escrow date. Everything is set up. Everything is signed, right? So you have everything to succeed in your world. Is that correct?
Yeah. So at that point, the last week for us, and granted, like, we're working with Landon in his team as far as updating them through this process. But when we start to get what people call this 3 different things, they call it the HUD, the settlement statement, or the ALTA. And it's pretty much an entire list of costs of what it's going to take to convey this property. And, when you first get it in a creative transaction, there's so many roving expenses just based on the way that creative happens that you're typically all of a sudden, like, the junior escrow officer gets spooked, like they get pushed out of the way. And the senior escrow officer comes in and they finally start spending a lot of time with you on the phone, going through different revisions. It's like typical to have a HUD revised 4 to 5 times, I'd say. That's pretty average for the things that I run across. Sometimes it could be little things. Sometimes it's really big things where you're saving people like 20 to 75 grand because of minor mistakes. So I'm working with a senior escrow officer. We're on the phone and I haven't spoke with her through the entirety of this transaction. We're on day 29 and we are literally on revision 6. We are so close. And at this point, I think I've done about 5 addendums. And addendums or amendments happen when little things have to change to accommodate the closing documents. Maybe the purchasing entity changed. Maybe the purchase price is finally solidified now that we've like shuffled all these costs and double checked things after the title report and commitment come back. You have to sometimes do like little tiny things will cause an addendum. And I remember she was asking me for like the 3rd one that day. And we had been on the phone for about 3 hours, which was longer than it typically took. I thought she was really doing her due diligence. I really appreciated her time.
3 hours?
Yeah. It was back and forth, like little this, little that. And of course, the agent is kind of watching this from afar. So the agent's sort of jumping in and I'm having to verify things with him so he understands why certain things are happening the way they are, why there's a proration here, or why this moves to this column, or whatever it is, right? This is the point at which you want everyone to feel very comfy. So however many conversations it takes, it doesn't matter. Like,
can you guys, everyone watching this right now, can you guys see why I work with Daniela and her team and how she goes above and beyond and what she does, and that I wouldn't be able to do what I do best if I don't hire what someone else does best? Like, this is why we work together cohesively, because of exactly this story right here.
It's tough because I don't want to bother you guys until there's something to bother you for, right? And you haven't been a part of the transaction for the last 29 days. Not really. Not in this deep, significant way other than to go, yep, that addendum looks good. Yep, that makes sense. So I want to make sure before this comes to anybody that it's tight and right. I don't want anybody's emotions to flare. That's the last thing you want, is emotions to flare. So we get to a point where I feel, I get the final email where the senior escrow officer, the agent, and me were like, okay, we good? Yeah, I think we're good. I think we're good. And then I get a phone call and I'm going, okay, no biggie. You know, what's up, senior escrow officer? What's going on? She goes, this is a VA. And I said, yeah, that's what our introductory email
It's been a
relayed.
VA.
Yeah. And she goes, I can't do VAs. And I'm going, thinking to myself, like cataloging, right? I'm double checking that I did it right. That's the first thing that always goes back to is what did you do wrong? Did you forget? Did you not beat the battle drum hard enough, consistently enough? I always go back to myself first. I never project onto other people. And I'm sitting there going, no, yeah. It's a VA. It's been a VA. And she's getting really kind of like short and panicky. And she's going, I can't touch that. I can't do that. I'm going, okay, why? And she goes, my underwriters won't let me transact like that here. I can't. And I'm like, okay, thinking to myself,
yeah.
I'm shocked. Yeah. I'm shocked. Right. And finally she goes, I can't help you anymore. I've got to go. And in that moment, I knew the calls I was going to have to make.
Yeah. In that moment, it all hits you right there, right? You're a day before close of escrow. This is a title company that we've done deals with before and have closed VA transactions with before. And I mean, just, that's so interesting. I mean, these things just come up on the safari, like you're saying, and whatnot. And it's how you respond to those, which is so beautiful, Daniela, and what you do, but just in general for everyone here, when problems come up, is that how you respond to those and how you address and provide solutions for those is what's really going to create a difference in terms of the end result of what that product is, and whether it's a real estate transaction or whatever it may be, because there's so many bumps on that safari. Even this huge one right here where we're all signed. I mean, the sellers literally probably have a notary
signing appointments. We have signing appointments. Everything's done.
Yeah.
So, and these moments, look, this is not uncommon. It's not crazy, but it was shocking for sure after spending that much time with her, sifting through this and just making sure it was perfect. It was a little shocking. And I think the first thing that came to my mind was, we're in Washington. This just got tantamountly more difficult, tantamountly more challenging. You know, I don't have a Rolodex of people that can transact this subject to as a VA, which means we have to consider a different way of transacting it. And even then we have to find people that are willing to transact it like that. And are the buyers even willing to buy it as a different kind of transaction where the deed doesn't necessarily convey? There's all these things going through my head. Agent's about to lose it. Seller who's about to receive money. How's she going to fit? Like, is she depending on this money in the next 24 hours? So I'm thinking through this, and I call you and Chris, and okay, that's the point where transaction management becomes a team sport.
Yep.
You know, because I can't make the next decisions alone. And you guys need to run back to your parties and fan the flame. Well, not fan the flames, but cool the flames. I need to go and figure out what can we do with this? And then we need to review with the buyer. Is this okay with you? So that was a fun couple days. It was like going down a drain, trying to find somebody.
So you chatted with us. You reached out to us and brought that information to us on the 11th hour. And we now needed to try and resurrect this transaction here and try and figure out how we can close this deal. Because for me, my stakeholder position in this as the wholesaler on this transaction was that we were taking an assignment fee. So that assignment fee is now at risk for us internally. Mm-hmm. And so
after 30 days, we've all been working on this for 30 days. The agent for what? He's at like day 80 or something on this probably.
Yeah. So his commission's at risk. And so for me, with my $11,000 assignment, I'm like, okay, I need to figure out a way to save this for myself. But more importantly, my mindset shifted to our end buyer's sake, because I do take responsibility and care about how we are transacting and ensuring that our product, our deliverable to our end buyer is something that they're proud of, something that they understand, and operating in full transparency, so on and so forth. So much so that I have a relationship with these buyers that I've done other deals with and sold them other deals, that I have a reputation and a responsibility, rather an obligation, to ensure that we proceed forward, and I'm going to fight for them so we get them their property. And so for us, we needed to pivot and find like you said, as a team sport, find another title company or a closing attorney or someone who can run this title. And I was going to ask you, so when we are making this pivot, I guess what makes it so critical or what are we trying to find with this as someone to close this file? Is it that we want to find someone who can provide title insurance for the transaction? That's what's critical. Like, we can find people who will do the transaction, but they won't provide title insurance. Is that the different part of it there? Or
I think in states like Oregon and Washington, it gets even more challenging because they hear VA and they just say, unless you're going to transact this as a contract, such as an executory contract where the warranty deed, which is the deed to the property, doesn't go to the purchasing entity, but you say on a joint contract together where there are different advantages and disadvantages to that, you're really, you're up against a wall with, does my buyer even want to buy something like this? So you're going, one, who will do it? Does it have to be an attorney that's going to do this contract? Can it be a title and escrow company that will still take it subject to? And then the second biggest question is, will they insure it? Because nobody wants to buy a property without title insurance. That starts to feel, does it happen on creative transactions? Yeah, all the time.
Totally.
But it doesn't feel great. You're already on abnormal territory. In abnormal terrain, and you're going, how do I secure myself? How do I make sure I do this right? And we're sitting there going, this is how you do it. So the way you do it in the best case scenario is you get the title insurance. You want the thing to be insured. And this leads off into, when you manage transactions, you're making relationships with people nationwide that are comfortable, knowledgeable, and capable of performing these transactions. And that's attorneys, that's title, that's escrow, that's a multitude of other people. And so not only am I calling like this Rolodex of contacts that my partners and I have built, but I'm calling colleagues and I'm going, you're in Oregon, you're in Washington, you're in California, you're here in Utah. Like, who knows who? And we're just like flipping the phone. And
I'm doing the same thing at the same time. Like, you and I are calling all around for sure.
Yeah. And if you don't know how to explain these kinds of transactions to folks or the needs, you can end up in a really, really bad situation with a title company that's going to tell you they can do it. And ultimately they blow it up because they really don't understand what we're doing. And it's not that it's rocket science. It's just that it's different.
It's just different. Exactly.
It's just different. It doesn't make us any better. It's just different. It's a different skill set. So I was thinking to myself, we're going to have to self-perform this thing, which basically means we're going to have to work alongside an attorney, which means the buyers and the seller are going to have to be willing to transact this with a contract. And at that time, the feedback we were getting from our buyers was, no, we don't want to do that. And no, we don't want to transact without title insurance. So I'm going, okay.
So let me pause here. I'll pause here real quick because I want to illuminate something that you guys are already picking up on. I already jumped in and said this a minute ago. Do you guys not see the value of having a Daniela in your corner that's going to bat and going to work for you? I'm so impressed by you in terms of not only just this one. This is a single transaction. We've done multiple together, but like the nuance of this, all the time, sweat, and equity you poured into this to get it to close. We ended up closing. We'll talk more about that. But just right here in this moment, she's already moved. We're going to talk more about it, but moved title companies and working through the negotiations, spending hours with the original escrow officer. Now, all of that time you spent doesn't matter anymore. Now it's a brand new file, brand new escrow process, brand new title search, all of those things. And you have to start from scratch again. And you've already put all that work in. We're on day 29 of 30. So just kudos to, again, you. Like, it's so cool to see how hard you work, how much you pour into it, how you go above and beyond, and all those little things that you deserve so much praise in terms of just this one transaction. So freaking cool.
I really appreciate it. But at the end of the day, this is the job. You know, and if you're not working like this, if you're not transacting like this, I really feel like maybe you got to be really careful about the decision to meddle with these strategies.
Right.
You know, you have to have a lot of honesty and integrity in this, or you're going to get swept into a pile with folks you don't want to be perceived as. So you can't just do it good, Landon. You got to do it.
I agree.
You got to kill it so that credibility and that trust is there. So the same thing that you said, you wanted to perform for your buyer, right? We want to perform for the seller. We want to perform for the agent so they don't turn away and go like, oh my God, I don't ever do this, right? So strangely enough, I'm calling and calling and calling people. I can't find anybody. And the agent comes out of left field and goes, I have somebody that I think might work. And I'm a little
the listing agent. So the listing agent for the seller.
Yes, sorry. Yes.
Okay.
The listing agent.
Yeah. Okay.
And he goes, I called a couple people and I think this might work. So I call this title company and I speak with this escrow officer, and she tells me that she used to do a lot of really creative deals in Alaska. And I'm thinking, okay, that could either be good or bad. I don't know what that means. I have no idea what that means. I'm like, Alaska, like, I have no idea if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So I'm talking her through this, and I'm going through this step by step to make sure she understands what we're doing, because we have no more time to waste already. Like we're pushing back on the agent and the seller and the timeline and the buyers. So she tells me she can do it. I'm going, okay. And then the other title and escrow company goes, we know them. We'll transfer everything over. I'm like, okay. So at this point, you know, I am hoping for the best as far as time wise. I'm going, you know, she can do it, but is it going to be another 30 days? Maybe another 15 days? And I think that this is where really excellent wholesalers shine, because they're able to coagulate the glue again and sort of revive and bring everybody back together and calm everybody down. And this is my favorite part about watching you work, is that you are consistently able to have really, really, really hard conversations with people that, like, I get nervous. When I get off the phone with you, I'm like, oh my God, like, how's that gonna go? Like, I get nauseous. I'm like, like, I could never have these conversations. And I'm such a perfectionist. I'm so type A that when things like this happen and you have to have those conversations, it's like, that's what has helped me in real estate, honestly, is having to call you guys and give you bad news. But what you have to go and do is far beyond, you know, my delivery. It's a way different level of empathy and just leadership. I'm constantly baffled, and it gets better. It gets even better. This is only like halfway, but yeah.
It's so true. And to your point, like, I appreciate that. And I've changed my mindset toward having hard conversations like this one right here. Like, we've had to move title companies. We need to extend escrow. Mind you, I think what really helped too there that you touched on is that the agent is the one who found this escrow office for the title company, that he was going to be willing to extend. Right. And now the seller's multiple months behind, about ready to head to their next missed payment. Right. And so we're up against a shot clock, if you will. So that definitely aided in us extending escrow to make my job a little bit easier. But I'll touch on a little bit of those hard conversations to kind of give you a glimpse of like my mindset toward those. Is I embrace those hard conversations for the same reason why I genuinely believe, just like the previous deals that we failed on or canceled or whatever it may be, is that failure is required to succeed. There's never going to be a linear line to succeed in this industry or in anything really. Like, I name one person has a perfect track record to succeed, and it's not going to happen. And so that being said, I know if I have these conversations, they're going to go one way or another, right? No different if you hit a putt on a golf course, you're either going to make it, you're going to miss it. And so for me, these conversations are a requirement to have to allow me to evolve and grow as a person, as a man, as an investor, as an entrepreneur. And I embrace those conversations because there are people out there in this world that are not willing to have those conversations. Solely if I just have this conversation, I'm already doing more than them. And I'm willing to embrace those. And so for me, it's just adding more scar tissue, or a callus, if you will, to having those abrasive, resistant conversations that it's a weird mindset that I actually enjoy those, The journey is the reward. And so having these conversations to navigate the nuances of the complexities of these things, it's actually fun. I enjoy them. Sure. Do I not look forward to hearing the response? I could easily, and you'll hear later on, I could easily get the FUs and the different things. And I've got my freaking fair share of those, let me tell you. And I can come off sometimes as an a-hole because I'm, I would say I try to come off competent and confident. And you're teetering on the line of arrogant and a-hole sometimes on those things. And I genuinely am not. I'm very humble, and I'm ultimately with a serving mindset and attitude toward these transactions, these sellers, these buyers, and myself, is that I'm genuinely trying to figure out a way to help. I'm not trying to nickel and dime and whatever it may be. And so my mindset toward it is these hard conversations. I'm grateful to even have the opportunity to have them, because I know the person next to me isn't in my position is not willing to have them. So I'm stoked that I get the opportunity to do so, So anyway, yeah.
Important shift though, super important shift. Yes. And it's just that inevitability of being able to grow in business.
Yep.
And you can't grow without having to face problems, without a doubt. So,
yep.
Yeah. I think we're like back on the ship at this point. And every time you transfer a file, you have to get new title insurance. You have to get another title report. And that's what takes so much time.
How long did they say? Do you recall how long? Because we just went through 30 days. Now I forget, we extended escrow. What was it? 2 additional weeks, or what was it?
It was 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks, which considering we had everything, I transferred 25 documents over.
Yeah.
We should have been there. We should have been really close. And the closer, as the days went on, I try to really back off when I'm waiting for title reports, because it's not their fault. It's an outside vendor they're waiting to perform for them, right? So I have to just constantly, are we on track? Are we on track? Do you have it yet? But with respect, of course, right? And when she got it, and it said the same thing as the other one said, I'm sitting there and I'm going, okay, so now it's time. We need to look at this HUD again now. We should already be getting this HUD. We got to push now. And she starts getting quiet. And I'm going, not the time to get quiet. Something's up. What's going on? Well, I'm really trying to explain this sort of transaction to the people here at this title and escrow company, because this is the first time we've done this. And I'm like, okay.
What about Alaska? What about this?
I'm sitting there going, okay, yeah, I understand. You have to push it up the chain. She was pushing back on a lot of the language in our contract, saying that it didn't, that's not what other people were looking at our contract, and she'd call me and go, what does this mean? And I'd say, it means this. It means what it very close to what it says. She goes, oh, they misinterpreted it again. So it's we're going back, call after call after call.
All over again.
And we haven't even seen the numbers. We haven't even gotten to the numbers yet. And finally, she calls me, and we're on day 10. And I'm starting to go, okay. If you consider we extended by 2 weeks, let's say we extended by 15 days on average, right? So by day 10, we are locking this thing up. We are confirming numbers. We are setting signing appointments. We are reviewing closing documents. And she goes, I can't, I have to transact this as a contract. And I'm going, what do you mean as a contract? And she kept getting confused about what a subject to was, and providing an all-inclusive deed of trust and promissory note package, sort of like a wraparound assumption package, a mirror wrap, what we call it, to the sellers, which are security documents, and a contract. And she was telling me, well, it is a subject to, but we have to use a contract for the security instruments. Now, I had never heard that. I had never been in that situation before. And she's adamant with me, Landon, adamant that we're closing this as a sub 2, but the contract are the security documents. And there's something in the back of my head. This is the tiniest little voice where I'm going, this is not it. But I wanted to have the respect for her, because at that point I'm going, okay, I need to be absolutely sure before I ring any alarm bells here what she's talking about, you know? And finally, I made her send me over a draft of what she was talking about. Yeah. She was refusing to show me anything. I'm like, I need to see it. I need to see what you're talking about. And that's when I realized she was not going to be able to do this transaction the way that we had planned.
You know, it's funny you say that, because when she called you and said, I need to do this as a contract, and you're humming, right? You're doing your thing. You're as a third party hearing that, I go, okay, so it's, I hear that you can do it. We just might have to do it a little bit differently. And so,
yes. Yes. And I'm going, that's not what the buyer wants. That's not what the buyer wants. That's not what, like, we're not fulfilling what we promised we were going to do to the seller. We're not fulfilling what we promised to do with the buyer. We already like bungled this thing at the very end. Now we're going to come back and change the kind of transaction. It just funk. It's funky. Like, this is not the way you want it to happen. Right. And when I finally saw that contract, I was like, okay, I need to reach out to the buyers and explain this. And then we all wanted to get on the phone with their attorney to go over what this meant, because the perception was that we really wanted the deed to convey, right? Like, that's okay. That's okay if that's okay if that's the way you want to transact. Transacting with a contract is not that. It's different. So you're already opening yourself up to, this is completely different now. And how do I explain that? And how do I explain that and then not force it? Because obviously you're not going to force somebody to buy something. And you know what I mean? It's really, really delicate. So,
and then also too, from the seller's perspective, like the way, you know, these types of contracts, executory agreements or executory contracts work too, is ultimately, in full transparency, the best thing for the seller, because it keeps the deed in their grasp in terms of power. So if in the case of default, ultimately, they don't have to transact the deed transfer or anything and try to foreclose on the end buyer or whatever it may be. So from a protection standpoint, one thing that in these types of deals, executories, the seller ultimately has power and I guess the ability to take the property back over in the case of a default or in case of certain issues that could come up 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the road, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point, the senior escrow officer is telling me that she cannot speak with the buyers and talk to them about the kind of contract this is because she's not licensed. So she's not willing to do it at all. But she's also not willing to move forward until she speaks with their lawyer. And the buyer's going, what's going on here? I need to understand what's happening. So the easiest way to do this is just get everybody on the phone.
Yeah.
You know, at this point, I feel like my credibility is suffering because I keep telling these buyers, like, yes, they said that I keep telling them things that I'm not able to do. And that's crippling for me. I'm going, this is how you don't want it to go. This is not it. Right. Yeah. So anyways, we get on the phone with their lawyer. We have about a 30-minute conversation, which I know the buyer had to pay for. And then we hop off and the lawyer goes, let me talk to them alone. And I think that was a really important juncture because they were able to potentially change their mindset about the fact that purchasing like this wasn't all that different and it wasn't all that more disadvantageous to them. You know, and this is really the difference, Landon, between experienced creative investors and inexperienced creative investors. Agreed. Is they're able to see, you know, the deal, the property, the asset itself is so much of more importance than some of the minor stipulations that change what that contract, you know, like the nuances of it, things that we get stuck on, things that they get stuck on as they choose to move forward, they dissipate. Right. And that's exactly what happened. They began to dissipate because I remember going back and forth with the agent. He's like, at this point, man, this guy, we're like trying to keep him from off a cliff.
Totally.
You know, and I don't blame him. I don't blame him. And the seller is like, you know, at this point, everybody is very, very emotionally charged for sure.
So how many days into? So are we still at that 10-day mark, or where are we at in that extended escrow period?
We're at about day 12.
Day 12. Okay.
We're at about day 12, 13.
Is this where it gets fun?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm excited. This is the meat and potatoes. You've made it 50 minutes into this recording of this podcast. for the meat and
If you're
potatoes.
still here, if you're still here,
if you're still here, this is where the juice starts for sure.
So I'm in Costco and it's like 4 p.m. I just got an email 2 hours before the buyers had confirmed they were willing to purchase with a contract. And I'm going, we're back on. It's like when you're playing street hockey and they're like car and everyone stops. And I'm like, okay, we're back. We're back in the street. We're playing. Okay. And I get a call from the agent and I'm thinking to myself, oh, he's going to be so stoked. This is such great news. And he goes, great news. I can't believe it. I can't believe we're here. This is so great. But I also have some bad news. And I stop. And I'm like, in my head, I literally thought, what else could possibly come to us at this point? And he goes, and he was so happy. I'm thinking, how bad could it be if you sound so happy? And he goes, I just left the house and the house, I am in the Bay Area. We don't get snow. I don't know what that means. So I'm sitting there going, what do you mean it's frozen? What are you talking about? Right. And he goes, I went to the bathroom and I went to flood. I lifted up the toilet and the water in the toilet bowl was frozen. And the water in the tank is frozen. And then he starts to sound upset. He's like, and there's icicles coming out of the kitchen and the whole house. And I'm sitting there going, how could you have just sounded so happy? What are you talking about? Like freaking Elsa just went over there and blew over the house. What are you like? So in my head, as a previous contractor, I'm going, pipes are done. Drywall's done. Flooring is done. And he tells me, I'm going to go purchase like 15 space heaters and plug them in and try to melt this girl. And I was like, oh my God, I was like, you know what? I need to call a few people.
Yeah,
I already did. And I'm like, okay, so now what? And I'm like, at this point, you get this call. And I mean, now what?
I remember this period of time from just from the perspective of me down here in freaking Scottsdale, Arizona, mind you. But I remember because I own a property up in Kalispell, Montana, which is about probably 8 hours due east of Seattle, Tacoma, at the same actually like what is that latitude? And so I remember we had concerns over there because it was negative 36 at that house over that same time period. And we had an issue with the heater at that house and I was freaking out, like trying to solve that whole thing. So my mind was just focusing on that. I never even once considered that house. I figured they had it handled, that one solved, the heater's on it. I did not realize there was an issue, but you get that call, you call me and I find out that the furnace goes out. So meaning the house is no longer heating. The water was never turned off to the house, such that there's water in the pipes throughout the entire house. And Seattle, Tacoma went through, I think they got down to 0 degrees. I don't think they went above freezing for, I think 4 straight days or 3 straight days. And so literally this entire house froze. Right. And so, and mind you, that bathroom he went to was on the first floor. And so, he knocked, the frozen toilet. And then we potentially have frozen pipes in the walls. For sure we do. And so what the risk is there is that if you turn the water back on, or after you thaw it out with those space heaters or whatever it may be, and you turn that water back on, the piping is going to contract and expand based on thermal expansion and cause pipe bursts or broken and cracked pipes throughout the entire house. Now you have water behind the walls, right? And we're not talking about a easy little Home Depot fix. This is something catastrophic that you would even consider an insurance claim at this point, honestly, for
this is catastrophic.
Yes.
This in my mind, I'm going, who in their right mind is going to buy this house?
Well, not only that, like, and we'll touch on it here in a moment, but not only, I guess let's talk about this here in a second. I got some more goodies as it relates to that mindset stuff that we'll talk about with my conversation with the agent down the road. But yeah. And so now we need to extend escrow an additional time because we need to get someone in there to not only get heaters in there, which the agent did. He went to Costco and purchased heaters to thaw out the house, and he kept us notified of that. And again, small kudos to him. Granted, there's a difference between fault and responsibility, no doubt. However, ultimately with her being out of state, this property is his responsibility. And consequently, this was his fault to allow the home to get to this point. You know, it was probably back of mind. He didn't think about it for sure. But kudos to him for going and getting heaters to thaw out the house and notifying us, right? He could have let this thing transact and close.
Oh, that would have been a nightmare. Can you imagine?
Right. We're probably likely a lawsuit. And
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, you know, it worked out the way that it did. And kudos to him. He stayed even keel the whole time. And but yeah, he heated the house, thawed it out, and we contacted a plumber at that time to go over to the house. And because we wanted a plumber there when you turn the water on, because that's when you start to get things going. So turn the water on. Immediately when they turn the water on, they hear spraying on the drywall. Like, you know what that sound is when a hose hits a wall. It's like,
that's so bad. That's
they go,
like
shut the water off. So they kill the water. So at that moment, we knew we had pipe burst, at least in one spot, let alone, and they were upstairs when they tested it. But if you think about how thermodynamics happens, heat rises. So the warmest part of the house is up top, right? So that means for sure the basement froze. For sure we have pipe burst down there. And so, you know, obviously we're thinking nightmare, disaster situation. Like, this is a deal killer in 99% of real estate.
You even told me, and you are so positive. You are the most positive person when it comes to this stuff. And you were like, yeah, this deal's done. I was like, oh my God, I've never heard him say that.
Right. Yeah. Like, okay. Yeah, for sure. I definitely hit a moment of weakness there. But the thing was I looked at that and I'm like, okay, so we have a broken furnace. That's $6,200. We have a house that needs to be repiped, and that's around $13,000 plus additional drywall work and paint that would have to happen because they'd have to cut the walls, probably another $2,000 to $3,000, and anything above and beyond that. So we're looking at, honestly, like an additional $20,000, $25,000 of work on this house.
Right.
What buyer is wanting to absorb that hit? Sure, we can negotiate and things, but what buyer is going to want to take on that project and all those things? And so,
and the cost of getting it like a tenant, which is can be really expensive too. And then on the flip side, how is the seller going to get out of this situation? Like, her situation,
oh my gosh,
like quintupled in complexity and in expense, frankly.
So then we get the plumber over to the house. He provides a quote of $13,600 for the repipe, plus then the HVAC unit, plus all the other little things, right? So now let's take a step back and look, right? This seller has a home, right? A liability that has $25,000 worth of repairs just to get it back to what it was, right? As well as now coming up on 4 missed payments. And now that the seller's down in Georgia, we find out in that moment that the husband leaves her with the kid that they have together. So now she's in the early stages of a divorce, which I would presume, I wouldn't know, but are probably the hardest part of that whole thing. I don't know. But so she's going through all of that. We would later find out her cell phone would get shut off because of missed payments. This seller is in she's
in bad way.
Freaking pain. Yeah. And ultimately, you know, with this transaction, you know, at the end of the whole thing, we get to remove that burden, and we'll talk about how we negotiated all of those things here in a second. But, you know, the seller's in a bad spot. Not only if we don't purchase, let's say we cancel, right? This crap that she has now, there's no retail buyer, there's no mom and pa that are going to buy this home and move into it and take on this. Right. So it has to be an investor willing to purchase this home. But the issue is she had no equity. Remember, right from the beginning when we talked about this, she was up against, because she purchased it with a VA loan. So her equity, the amount she owed based on the purchase price, was so tight and narrow, she didn't have room for that. And so, you know, at one point, the agent brought up on this big 3-way call between myself, our end buyer, and him. He's like, I'm not sure if we're going to move forward. We may just take it off and do a cash out refinance. And I took a step back and I was talking to the agent, and I go, you know, I don't think she has enough room, right? Because we're purchasing it at around $400,000, let's say, ballpark, whatever it was. She owes $365, but a cash out refinance, those lenders require typically 80% loan to value. So when you take 20%, she didn't have enough to even do that, let alone that's one thing. Okay. Let's say she brought money to the table to refinance.
Right.
Additionally, that cash out refinance requires an appraisal. What are they going to do when they walk that house? They're going to see that they have frozen pipes and pipe bursts, a broken HVAC unit, and all these different things that the seller has to rectify. And that's not even it. She's behind on her payments. She would have to make those payments current for the lender to accept that refinance.
It's beyond disastrous. It's a beyond disastrous situation. Yeah. I don't even know how. That's the kind of thing where you are literally financially drowning. Yep. And there are very little, if any, ways to get out, but just going bankrupt.
Yeah. Yeah.
And totally. Like she's out of state, the expense of coming back.
Right.
To deal with any of this.
They brought that up to about her just coming back and moving back into it. But again, she was missing payments. Yeah. She can't afford to live there.
Yeah.
I get it. I get the agent was trying to figure out solutions and he's thinking about things and whatnot. And it wasn't as if he was bringing up stuff and I was casting it down, because if there was a solution, if she had enough equity to do a refinance and none of these things happen and they wanted to move forward with that, I'm going to be the first person saying, hey, that it seems like that might be a better fit for you in this transaction. But ultimately, there's nothing else. In full transparency, there's not a single other buyer. There's not we're 45 days into this transaction in escrow. And if we cancel, they're going to have to remarket this property. And the buyer for this has to be purchasing it an identical way of what we're doing here. But what does that mean? Another 30 to 45 days of escrow. What does that mean?
Mortgage is stacking. She's in pre-foreclosure. The property is moving out of her hands at that point.
Correct.
And it's moving on to a trustee.
Yep.
Where you don't have the same level of control at all.
Exactly.
And I think that the agent is working through these problems under the direct presumption that our buyers are out.
Right.
But
true.
They weren't.
They were not. And so, I have a YouTube video that I posted here back in, I think it was the first part of March 2024. But it was the exact conversation I had with this agent, because I had a conversation with the end buyer in terms of, hey, what would it take for us to continue with this file and proceed and close on this property? And we're talking numbers at this point. What's it going to take numbers wise? Because mind you, we got into this transaction with, what was it? 12K to the seller, 10K to the agent, 11K assignment.
Right.
And I think we had reduced, I think before then we had reduced cash to seller down to, I think 10K or like 9,500 or something, because of an additional missed payment that they were going to pay out of there. Anyway. So that being said, we're chatting and we're building out what we call an entry fee. The entry fee is cash to seller, agent commission, closing costs, transaction coordination, my assignment as the wholesaler, as that stakeholder, as well as rehab, as well as all of the other private money, various things that he's building up to build out what he calls his entry fee. And he wanted to keep his entry fee below, I think, $55,000 or $56,000 all in. But we just got hit with what? We just got hit with a $22,000 rehab. That just took up half of his entry fee. So now we got a nickel and dime our way up to that 55 or whatever. And so, I have a relationship with this end buyer, and he is an amazing person. I know you know that. And so we get off that phone, and now this is just like one of your conversations. I know he probably felt the same way. He's like, well, crap, Landon has a hard conversation in front of him, because now I have to call the agent, and that conversation goes from, cash to seller that was originally at 12K is now at 0. And that's what it ended up being at the end of this whole transaction, is cash to seller at $0, as well as the agent's commission and time. And remember, he did a bunch of work previously, all the marketing dollars and everything, his brokerage fee and the heaters, the time. He even paid some of utilities at one point, he said. All of this, we need to kill that commission down to a flat fee, somewhere in the range of $1,000 or $2,000. And so that conversation I needed to have with the agent. And so I get on there, and then we even reduced our assignment from 11K down to 7K. So we dropped 4K on that to try and get this moved forward. And so I have the conversation with the agent, and kudos to him for staying even keel. Not a fun conversation to have your knees cut off for your commission of all the hard work, the time, everything for it. And to his point, he made some some credible acknowledgments about how the quote could be considered a disaster quote and various things where they didn't really cut drywall. They just assumed based on the, the pipe bursts and everything. But, ultimately at the end of the day, I actually just got a text yesterday from the end buyer that the overall finished repiping of the house cost $12,870. So it was spot on.
Lucky. Do you know how rare that is? That is so, again, kudos to the buyer. They were experienced investors.
Yep. And I connected. I connected the end buyer with a plumber of a friend that I know up in the area. So we're all working together as a team to get this to move forward, right? And I get the agent to agree $0 to seller. And then I hit him at $1,000 flat, but I had already agreed with the end buyer that if we got them to $3,000, they'd be willing to move forward. And I made up a little bit of that on my assignment. So I went to the agent knowing we're going to go to negotiate. So I went a little bit lower, and I knew it would be offensive, and it was going to be hard to hear. And I expected the FUs, full transparency, totally get it. But it was what it was. The numbers are the numbers. And we agreed upon a flat $3,000. It's what we ended up on. And so seller got $0, agent got $3,000 flat. I got a $7,000 assignment, and a buyer got a property that they ended up repiping the house, brand new furnace. That was $6,200. That was their end quote for that. And all of the other repairs, ultimately a lot of those repairs are value add to the property, that when they go to sell the property in 10 to 15, whatever they do with it, they have a repiped house, they have a brand new furnace. So those are value add that adds equity to the home in some way. But
those expenses would break most long-term rental investors.
Yep.
That would cut you at the knees for years of profit.
Yes.
And they had a partnership. One of them was a contractor. They were responsible buyers. They knew how to transact creatively. They had pockets deep enough to handle this and still make it work. And I think that is often so overlooked when you are choosing to invest like this. Like, yes, you can get into a great deal sometimes with no money out of pocket, but you better have some money in your pockets, because things are going to go wrong. I mean, after this, Chris and I were sitting there going back and forth about all the expenses on our own investments and laughing, because it's like, it just never ends, man. This is a part of it.
It never ends.
So, I feel as if we were dealing with a first time buyer, this would have been completely different.
Yeah, nope, they're gone. And, another thing too, just to quickly highlight these end buyers, sophisticated buyers, are not solely purchasing with the singular mindset of cash flow. Right. They're purchasing it looking at the entire picture as a whole. Cash flow is one of those pillars, no doubt, but so is appreciation. The Northwest is a highly appreciable market. So meaning over 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 years, the home value is going to increase. That's how real estate works. There's downs, there are ups, whatever it may be. But over time, the Northwest is a highly appreciable market. Mm-hmm. But another one that they were they really wanted was depreciation as well too. And so they get all three of those things. They valued the appreciation as well as the depreciation more than the cash flow.
Right.
And so that's where they were okay with knowing we're adding value to the home beyond just some lipstick paint and new carpet. We're actually adding, intrinsic mechanical equipment as well as repiping the house. So it's like,
they're capital expenditures
exactly.
that you hope not to have to hit for 10 years.
Yeah.
When you first buy a place. So absolute value add. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, what a journey. And, toward the end right now, we ended up closing it on February 2nd. So it ended up being a 60-day escrow period, tumultuous period, ups and downs, a journey, a safari, like you said. And, toward the end of it, we had difficulty getting a hold of the seller because her cell phone was shut off because of missed payments, to get a notary scheduled and set up at this time. She was in pain. She needed to get out from this house. But at the end of it, this burden's gone from her world. Not only that, she still has her entitlements. So here, when she figures out and rebuilds her life and her world here in the next few years, and starts over, she's going to be able to come back here in a few years and utilize her VA that she worked so darn hard for and earned, that she can go out and buy another home using her entitlements, that she was a month or two away from losing her entitlements and killing her credit for 10 plus years. So creative finance was the solution for this seller. Creative finance was the solution to allow her to have her VA entitlements and also help rebuild her credit. We're going to be making payments every single month on that mortgage, which is the best thing you can have on the ledger for your credit, which is going to build her credit every single month to have a performing note against her that ultimately is going to help aid her to be able to qualify for her next purchase. It's a success story that we had to go through the freaking trenches that we felt to get to the end result. But
I do think it was a win-win-win for everybody. Yep. And I think that, the fact that everyone came out with some scars was a good thing, because it was a group effort. The buyers didn't exactly get to transact the way they wanted. They had to make a lot of sacrifices. The seller had to make sacrifices. The agent had to make sacrifices. We went through this whole thing, 60 days, we didn't earn $1. And, there were sacrifices made there, and just hoping every time that, we could get this thing closed for the right reasons. But what's funny is that I reached back out to the seller recently for some random things, and she's so kind.
She's
so kind. And, the buyers went ahead and paid off her phone bill so that they could reach her if they needed to. And so she just had a way to And it's just, they have a good relationship. They have a good, everything now is, everyone is moving into their corners, but the communication is there, which is so critical for a successful subject to a creative transaction, that open communication. Yep. And so kind of being able to walk away, but I'll tell you, I'm still waiting for the shoe to drop. There's a part of me that still believes this didn't close. I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting to hear, what is that, or what's going on with Tacoma. But we had 10 addendums on that. By all that is the most addendums I've had on any file ever.
There you go.
But I learned so much. And so, and at the end of the day, everybody got out a little tougher for sure, but in a better position probably. So
I thought it was a win-win-win. I mean, ultimately, yes, the agent's commission got cut down due to some unfortunate circumstances that were caused by him and allowed by him, no doubt. And it's, certain things there, but ultimately it ended up allowing everyone to move on. And the end result, I think, is that creative finance was there for the win. And, I'm grateful to have you as a part of that team for this deal. I don't think we would have got it done without you. So I'm so grateful for that. And ultimately the buyers too, no doubt, this whole thing wouldn't have ended had they not wanted to move forward. We're in the process right now of another deal where very similarly, but this is a full roof and some brick siding. That's a $20,000 repair for a property out in Texas that the buyer is not wanting to move forward. And so
it's a hard no.
It's a hard no. So anyway, but yeah, so that's, what a journey, what a deal deep dive. Such a fun one.
Yeah. And, we're going to try and bring lots of lessons learned back to this show. If you've lasted this long, we're so deeply appreciative that you're here listening to us go on and on about this. And, we hope that we can help anyone that has questions on creative finance transactions or deals. I have a warm lead. I have a potential. I don't know how can I do this in this state? Landon and I are both available and reachable on social media. So thank you so much for tuning in. And we're really excited for the next couple episodes.
See you guys.
Bye.